Hello, I'm Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. I want to welcome you to the broadcast and extend this personal invitation to you to come and join us in one of our exciting Spirit-filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m. Our Sunday morning worship begins at 10 a.m. Our Sunday evening worship begins at 6 p.m. And we have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study that begins at 7 p.m. We are taking a journey through the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. Join us, won't you? Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. It's church the way that it should be. Hey, I'll save a seat just for you. And now, let's join our service already in progress. All right. Time because y'all can't remember from 1 week.
We really didn't. The last time we had Sunday or Bible study, we didn't really Bible study.
It was, yeah, you did something else on it, but it's, yeah. But, but, yes, we were. We were indeed. And now we're going to get into, we went over a lot of the law, now we're going to get into some of the punishments. Yeah, yeah. Now we're going to get into some of the punishments that God is putting down because of them. And that we're going to get into Leviticus chapter 20 tonight. So Leviticus 20 verses 1 to 5 says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Again thou shalt say to the children of Israel, Whosoever he be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that giveth any of his seed unto Molech, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. And I will set my face against that man, and will cut him off from among his people, because he hath given his seed unto Molech, and defiled my sanctuary, and to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do any ways hide their eyes from the man, when he giveth of his seed to Molech, and kill him not, then I will set my face against that man and against his family, and will cut him off, and all that go a whoring after him to commit whoredom with Molech among their people." So, wasn't Molech the baby? Yeah, Molech was the baby killing one. Y'all remember that? Y'all remember the baby killing thing? Okay, yeah. All right. So the worship of this horrific idol, Molech, was mentioned back in Leviticus 18:21, and we'll go back over that. I know most of y'all remember, but he was worshipped by heating a metal statue of him. And they heated it up until it got red hot. It was just glowing hot. And then they would place a living infant on the outstretched hands of this statue. And when they did that, they would be beating drums so loud that it drowned out the screams from the child there until the child was burned to death. Okay? Now, there are some that believe that the worship of Molech the infants were not actually burned to death, that they were only passed through the fire. And this was done in a ritual honor to the idol. And it's possible that maybe sometime that happened. That is what happened occasionally. But it seems that at least one aspect of the offering of infants to Molech was actual human sacrifice. So, does Molech worship happen today? I'm going to get y'all involved a little bit on it. Okay.
They don't talk of it.
They don't believe in, our God. They believe in their own.
Okay.
So they probably do mess up things.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
they were allowing abortions. Isn't that not the same as,
That's a very good point. That's the point that I was going to make. That I was going to bring up. Offering infants and human sacrifices in the form of abortion. And in fact, there is, they are sacrificing not necessarily to Molech, particularly per se, just that particular God, but they're doing these abortions in worship of themselves.
Of their stupidity.
Of their stupidity and of their, I don't want to have a kid right now, so I'm going to get an abortion. They're worshiping themselves, and then they sacrifice that child for that. In fact, there's one method of abortion that's very similar to the procedure of Molech worship, and it is called installation. And in installation, there is a chemical, the chemicals are injected into the womb. And these chemicals literally burn the child to death. And it can take an hour, sometimes more, for this child to burn to death in the womb. And then after this happens, then the mother goes into labor and then delivers a dead, burnt child. And it burns the child up. Now, before, it used to be in the 30s, 40s, even early 50s, about 30% of the abortions were done this way. Now it's dropped down quite a bit, okay? Now it's about 0.9% of the abortions are done this way. Now that sounds like, well, okay, well, that's not so bad. It's still bad, but it's not real bad. Well, when you consider that last year, in 2025, there were 591,770 abortions that were conducted. That was last year. So at 0.9% of 591,770 children is 5,360. So 326, I'm sorry, 5,326. So 5,326 children were still murdered in that way. Now, that sounds a lot like Molech worship to me. They're doing basically the same thing. And that's what these people are doing, is they are sacrificing these children for self. It's for me. I'm my own God. So why should I worry about any of this? Bother with the child. So they abort the child, but it's still murder. It's still killing. Okay? And God says anybody that does this, let me get back over here on where I'm supposed to be, shall surely be put to death. Okay? Now, this shall surely be put to death. This is a very emphatic construction in Hebrew, meaning the structure of the sentence is very emphatic. And when you put it together, and I'm not going to go into the Hebrew, what the Hebrew actually is on it, but when it is translated literally, it means dying, he shall die. Okay? It means what it means. Yeah, it means that he is going to, dying, he's going to die, and it's much more emphatic. Okay? So it's pretty deep that they're saying, that God's saying, this person is going to die. If he does this, he's going to die. And in the case of child sacrifice to Molech, God commanded that the execution be carried out by stoning. Okay? And the stoning was to be done by the community. Now, the stoning it's not a very good way to die, number one. But in stoning, there had to be at least two witnesses. Two witnesses were required for a conviction. And these two witnesses had to see the crime happen. Now, this is going to be important for not so much this one, but later on. Okay? The witnesses initiate the execution by casting the first stone. So the two witnesses who saw this happen, okay, they had to be the ones to initiate the execution. They were the ones that threw the first stone. Yes. No, they were just doing the execution. It was a public execution, okay? Now, when a person was stoned, they were taken outside of the city so they could remove the sin from inside the city. And they would take them outside of the city, and you don't see it much. It don't see a lot of people talking about it, but normally what they would do is they would dig a hole about waist deep for the person. And they would put the person in the hole, and then they would cover them with dirt, their hands down to their side in dirt, and the person stand there and couldn't move. And then they would cover them with in later times, they would cover them with a sack or a sheet or something like that. But this person is standing there, they can't move, they can't do anything, and then everybody picks up stone. Now, there couldn't be just little bitty pebbles that you picked up and threw. The stones had to be a certain size. They had to be big enough that you could hold it in your hand real good, about the size of a softball, baseball, something like that. And then they would throw this, and it didn't stop until that person was dead. Okay? So it wasn't a pleasant way to die. Okay? You were alive when the first one hit, and you're probably going to be alive and conscious for quite some time, depending on how hard, how many times it hit you in the head. But there were people not deliberately throwing at your head. They would throw big rocks at your body and everything else to break bones and all this other stuff. They wanted it to be, it was not intended to be a pleasant way to die. There was no such thing as cruel and unusual punishment. Okay? There was no way to, it wasn't, these people didn't have rights. This was an execution. All right? So, and it was performed by the community. And this was to show that this was, in a powerful way, a sin against the community. Not just against one person. It was a sin against the community. And since it was a sin against the community, then it would be punished by the community. Okay? Now, he said that if the person sees it happening, sees somebody worshiping Molech or doing these things, and doesn't do anything about it. Now, this is very important because it still applies today. Okay? God said that he will deal with those people and do that. But think about that. We are facing that every day. When we ignore evil, that is evil. And by us sitting around and not saying anything and not, doing what we need to do to spread the gospel, are we not ignoring evil? Because we're just allowing evil to happen. I'm not going to say anything. I'll just that's not my job. That's the preacher's job, or that's this person's job, or that's somebody else's job. I see it happening, but I'm not going to say anything about it. Then you are just as guilty as that person, because to ignore evil is evil itself. Yes? Yeah, they were the ones that cast the first stone because they were the witnesses. And again, that goes back to, and we'll see this a little later on, but the ones that cast the first stone, they had to be so certain of what they saw, so certain of everything, that they were willing to initiate the execution themselves. They had to be so sure in their mind that this is what was happening that they initiated the execution themselves. Okay? Yes.
Does history say how old the person had to be in the stone as one of the ones that threw the stone?
With one, there might be, but I'm not familiar with the one out offhand. I'd have to look that up and see. I guess as long as you were old enough to throw a rock, you could do it. But we have to look at it, and in those days, we didn't. Those children weren't coddled and wrapped in bubble wrap and helmets on when they went outside, knee pads and elbow pads and everything else. These children, they grew up among all this stuff. People dying all the time. Death was just a part of life for them. It happened. Okay? But the people had to be the ones that actually initiated the the execution. The community had to do it. And as I said, to ignore evil is evil in itself. And the penalty for Molech worship was death. And if the sentence was not carried out by Israel like it was supposed to be, God declared that he would set his face against that man and his family. So in other words, if Israel didn't prosecute, God would. If the legal system failed to prosecute the man, then God would. And it's bad enough to be stoned, but to have God turn his face from you, that's even worse. Okay?
This is dealt with to an extent in the New Testament. You catch your brother in a fault, you're supposed to first go to him privately.
Mm-hmm.
And if he doesn't listen, you get one or two witnesses, and you take it before the church council.
Right.
And then if that brother doesn't repent or whatever, then you're supposed to basically like kick him out, like he's a Gentile, like he's an
Yeah.
unbeliever.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Not put to death, but
yeah, not put to death, but it's and we're going to look at at some of this some of the other ones, because the death penalty was but in all actuality the death penalty was not carried out that much. And we're going to talk about that in a little while. All right, verses number 6 to 8. And the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits and after wizards, to go a whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul, and will cut him off from among his people. Sanctify yourselves therefore, and be ye holy, for I am the Lord your God, and ye shall keep my statutes and do them. I am the Lord which sanctify you. So in this specific passage here, God gave Israel nothing to do regarding the penalty. He simply said he would execute the penalty in this particular passage, okay? Involvement in the occult. Involvement in such occult practices was always separate, will always separate someone from God. These people that they try to make it look fun. I remember growing up, one of the big things growing up actually was a Ouija board. People were buying, parents were buying their kids Ouija boards, and it's an occultic practice. It's summoning familiar spirits. It's delving into the devil is what it's doing. But God says that somebody that does this, the people don't have to do anything to them. God says, I'll take care of those people myself. All right? So, but anytime anybody gets into occultic practices, it will always separate them from God. It's real interesting to see, especially down in New Orleans. It's real big in Louisiana, and especially in New Orleans. You go by, they've got the tarot card readers and the palm readers and all of this other stuff. Yes.
That's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's just not Louisiana.
It's not strictly Louisiana.
I know several places here in Fort Smith that,
Fort Smith is in downtown, got that cult shop.
Yeah. And they've got a lot of you kind of see in some of the in some areas in Louisiana, you see it in New Orleans. I'll put it, not all Louisiana, all New Orleans, because it's more tourist type of attraction than it is anything else. But it's still occultic practices.
right.
Yes.
The person who created the Ouija board, they probably had to have a lot of guts.
Well, they had a lot of something. They had a lot of evil spirits in them, I guess. But this is always going to separate somebody from God. When you get involved in that kind of stuff, it's always going to separate somebody from God. That I heard a couple of kids that talked about going out in the woods and having a seance and stuff like that. That was big when I was growing up and I was in school. People go out and have seances. They were innocent, but it was actually summoning demonic spirits, and they were separating themselves from God as they did that. Okay? And
When I was growing up, I had a Ouija board. And what I said I wanted, my mama bought it, And then we played with it and everything. And then after a while, she decided, no. And she took it out and burned it.
yeah, we had a Ouija board growing up too, and
And she would do it, and she would do it whatever she wanted.
well,
Wanted it to say.
we had one growing up, and my brother and sister were doing it one time, and they both were accusing the other one. No, you're pushing it. No, you're pushing it. No, you're pushing it. I'm not doing it. And they ask a question, who are you, or something like that. And I think it spelled out Satan. And they picked it up and took it out and burned it right then. They threw it out and burned it and never came back in the house again.
My Ouija board my mama would do it, and it always said that. Mary, and of course it always said Joe. Get real.
But you can always, there's all these things out there that they can have. It's just the same thing as you see ghost hunters. You see those ghost hunters, the mediums that are doing that. There's a ghost hunter. There's a actually ghost hunting group in Van Buren. It's the Arkansas Valley Ghost Hunters or something like that. They've got a building downtown in Van Buren that they do it, and it's they go out, they go ghost hunting and do all that stuff. That's just summoning familiar spirits. Is all you're doing on that.
That's just being stupid.
Now, if you go out in the
I know I should call people. That is just.
All I know is when the angels move here in the presence of in us is when the lights come on, when nobody.
Huh?
That's just angels moving by.
That's right.
Well, I guarantee you there's angels.
Yes.
They're just hurting
Come on,
themselves.
when you're just doing
Yeah, they're just hurting themselves is all they're doing.
One of them will.
They're gonna get hit by it. Yeah. But this is the occult. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's like people that go to church and say they're Christians, but they gotta read their horoscope.
Yeah.
No, those don't.
Going through their horoscope and doing all this other stuff. And I tell you, there are some people, and they live in Fort Smith, that will say, I can't go because Mars is in retrograde with Jupiter and all this other stuff. Go away,
Get out of my life.
if I don't want to do something, I don't have to use the excuse that Mars is in retrograde or anything like that. I just, I don't want to do it. So
It's like they don't know the books of the Bible, but they can tell you what their sign is.
yeah, they can tell what your sign is. They can tell you where, what phase the moon is in and what, all this other stuff. Yeah. But this was actually the driving force behind the Ephesian church's dramatic rejection of magic and the occult materials in Acts 19:17-20. Their hearts were turned to God, so they automatically turned away from the mediums and familiar spirits. Okay? Now, 1 John 4:2 makes it clear that these spirits are not from God. They're not from God. You go into one of those mediums and sit down and say, I want to talk to dear departed great-great-great-grandpa Jones or whatever, and she starts talking to, that ain't great-great-great-great-grandpa Jones. Okay?
Talk to you long enough to get the information.
Well, even if they do,
and
yeah.
everything, and then they're gonna tell you what you're wanting.
What you're wanting to hear. And even if they do have it, and can people channel some spirits? Yes, they can channel some spirit, but they're not good spirits. They're channeling demonic spirits, and that demonic spirit is a familiar spirit.
90% of them are.
90% of them are fake. Yeah, they're fake is what they are. Okay?
They just think.
But if anybody talks about the spirits and that stuff, they're not from God. These people that walk through the cemeteries and have the recording devices that they walk through the cemetery trying to get people to talk to them. Okay, well, maybe there are some spirits talking to them, but it ain't godly spirits that's doing it. Okay? Such occult, these occult things, they are Jesus-denying spirit. And they must be rejected. You can't even mess around with them. Can't even joke around with them. They have to be completely and totally rejected. Okay? Verse number 9. For everyone that curseth his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. He hath cursed his father or his mother. His blood shall be upon him. Okay, kids? Yes. That means that, yeah, okay. Now, virtually all commentators are going to agree that this is not the outburst of a small child, all right, or even an adolescent. That's not what it is. Kids are going to, children, small children, adolescents, they're going to rebel against parents. It's just going to happen, okay? But the settled heart of an adult child, that means one that is grown up, knows better, and they have a settled, such intergenerational warfare is not to be tolerated. Okay? And it was punishable by death. They could kill you. Okay? This was a crime against the family and the community. Now it says, curses his father or his mother. This wasn't merely just saying something bad about or to one's parents. It was likely calling down of a death curse on them or something like that. Even considering that this law applied to an adult child who threatened their parent. This was still a pretty severe law, right? Now, according to Deuteronomy 21:18-21, though, it was, and it was practiced in ancient Israel, it had a built-in protection for the rights of the child. Deuteronomy 21:18-21 states that the parent did not have the right to punishment. Okay? So in other words, if the child, even though the adult child or any of them came up and started mouthing off to the parents didn't have the right to just kill them right then. Right? That's not what it was. Instead, the parents had to bring the accused child before the elders and the judge of the city. So they had to say, okay, this child has been doing this, and they had to bring him to the elders. Now, this meant that the parent, against all customs of that time, did not have absolute power over life and death of their own children. Okay? And as a practical matter, the judges of Israel rarely, if ever, administered the death penalty in such cases. But the child was held accountable. It wasn't that the child got off scot-free. They were held accountable. Okay? All right.
That's what's wrong with this world today. The children are not being held
That's absolutely right.
accountable.
People are not being held accountable for things. Did anybody see the news today? They were doing an ICE raid in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this lady tried to ram some of the ICE agents. So one of the ICE agents shot the girl and killed her, right? And now there's a big uproar in Minneapolis, and the mayor of Minneapolis got up there and he said, I've seen the video when it wasn't anywhere near self-defense. He's just stirring up trouble is all he's doing. And, it's the same thing. These people are not being held accountable for anything. They think they can go out and just do whatever they want to. And then when there are consequences to it, then they get mad and say, oh, well, why were there consequences? There shouldn't have been consequences. You were supposed to leave me alone. I was supposed to be able to run over you, and you weren't able to do anything about it. But that's not the way that it works. Okay? There are consequences to action. There's always consequences to action. And in fact, I'm trying to remember who it was exactly that said it. I think it was Benjamin Franklin. It might not have been, but I think it was Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson. One of those actually said that punishment is not a deterrent to crime. The certainty of punishment is a deterrent to crime. Okay? If you commit a crime and they keep slapping you on the wrist, is that going to keep you from committing the crime? No, you're just going to go ahead and, so what? You're going to slap me on the wrist again? All right, slap it, go ahead. Oh.
That's what happened with Hitler in World War II.
Yeah.
He took something, they just basically told him no, basically slapped him on the wrist. He was like, he stopped, and then he took something else.
And that's what people do. And then when they do finally get thrown in prison, they're like, oh, I can't believe you threw me in prison. Whereas if they knew from the very beginning, the first time they went in there, you're a first-time offender, okay, I'm going to cut you some slack. I'm only going to send you to prison for 10 years. And you're eligible for parole after 8 of them. So, if that happened, people are not going to be as apt to go out and commit crimes because even the first time, I'm going to go to prison. Yes?
Same thing. Putin, seen Valdez do all he wanted to do, and the United States didn't do nothing about it.
Yeah.
So he's doing what he wants.
Yeah. Yep.
Do I get an A?
But eventually there's going to be consequences to it. And the children were held accountable for actions. Even though they may not have been killed, they may not have been stoned to death, they were held accountable for it. Here's another one, verse 10. And the man that committeth adultery with another man's wife, even he that committeth adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. So God commanded the death penalty for adultery in ancient Egypt. Maybe that's what we need to do. Make adultery, Israel. Make the death penalty, adultery, a capital offense in the United States. But as with the previous laws and their penalties, this was because of the exceedingly great social consequences of this sin. Basically, adultery murders marriages. And God commanded the ultimate penalty to discourage it. But as a practical matter, this death penalty was rarely carried out, right? As was the case of most of the situations in Leviticus 20, as we said before, where capital punishment is commanded for them to do it. It was very rarely, and this is because any capital crime, like we talked about, required 2 or 3 witnesses, and the witnesses had to be so certain about what they saw, so convinced and so sure of what they saw, that they had to be willing to cast the first stone. Okay? That is, they had to initiate the execution. It'd be just like you going to court, you witness a capital offense. You going to court and say, yes, I saw it. Saw it. Yes. No. Somebody, they had to be that certain of it. So particularly in a case of adultery or other sexual, would rarely, very rarely be 2 eyewitnesses to it, right? Number one, you're not going to get 2 of them. And you're not going to get 2 of them willing to initiate the execution. And so the death penalty would not be carried out, okay? Death penalty so rarely in ancient Israel, especially for these crimes, it still did good for Israel to have it. Okay? The penalty in the law of Israel clearly communicated an ideal that Israel was to reach for. They should strive to do this, okay? And it made people regard their sin much more seriously. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Even if those who committed these sins escaped the penalty, God still regarded it as wrong. Now think about it. Your sin, our sin, right now, how much more seriously would we take our sin if we realized that there was a possibility that they could come and take us and execute us because of our sin? Now, don't you think we'd take our sin a little bit more seriously? You know? Somebody said, you committed a sin. I'm going to take you out and we're going to stone you to death. Then, we would take our sin a little bit more seriously than that. But our sin actually does carry the death penalty. Okay? If we don't repent and turn from our sin, then we're condemned to everlasting death, to everlasting hell, which is everlasting separation from God. So it is very important. God regarded those sins as wrong. Israel regarded those sins as wrong. Right? All right, verses 7-12. And if the man that lieth with his father's wife hath uncovered his father's nakedness, both of them shall surely be put to death, their blood shall be upon them. And if a man lie with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death, they have wrought confusion, their blood shall be upon them. So the specific laws against incest were covered more completely in Leviticus 8, 6-18. And in Leviticus 18, the penalty for the crime of incest was not explained. It just told it what it is. Here, God is telling ancient Israel that it should be punished by death. Okay? Incest is a sin that murders families, and it was not to be permitted. Right? All right, here's another one. Verse number 13. If a man also lie with mankind as he lieth with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination, they shall surely be put to death, their blood. So the specific law of homosexuality, again, was listed in Leviticus 18:22. Though God here commanded the death penalty, under the guidelines of Deuteronomy 17, we should note that this was the same punishment as for adultery and incest. Incest. Homosexual acts were regarded as these other family killing sins. Now, verse 14, chapter. And if a man take a, it is wickedness. They shall be burnt with fire, both he and they, that there be no wickedness. Now marries his wife, and then he goes marries his wife's mother. Okay? This is in Leviticus 18:17. Some commentators believe the phrase shall be burned with fire did not refer to execution, but rather some kind of brand, kind of like the scarlet letter. You know, it was branding with a hot iron. And if somebody got branded with a hot iron, it would certainly accomplish every desirable end that they were looking for, both for punishment and for prevention. Nobody wants to have that brand on them. Eh? All right, verses 15 to 16. And if a man lie with a beast, he shall surely be put to death, and ye shall slay the beast. Unto any beast, and lie down thereto, they shall kill the woman and the beast, they shall surely be put to death, blood shall be upon them. So, again, the sin of bestiality is described in Leviticus 18:23. God commanded the death penalty in ancient Israel for such perverse sexual expressions. And those who committed such acts were responsible for their own death. Okay? Now, what does that mean? They were responsible for their own death. Huh?
You knew you were gonna die, but you chose to do it anyway.
Okay. There are ways to look at that they were responsible for their own death. Also could mean that they were required to take their own life. Okay? And we'll see that again in a little while. And if a man shall take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and see her nakedness, and she see his nakedness, it is a wicked thing, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people, and hath uncovered his sister's nakedness, he shall bear his iniquity. And if a man shall lie with a woman having her sickness, and shall uncover her nakedness, he hath discovered her fountain, and she hath uncovered the fountain of her blood, and both of them shall be cut off from among the people. And thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy mother's sister, nor thy father's sister, for he uncovereth his near kin, they shall bear their iniquity. And if a man shall lie with his uncle's wife, and he hath uncovered his uncle's nakedness, and they shall bear their sin, and they shall die childless. And if a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing, he hath uncovered his brother's nakedness, and they shall be childless. So the specific laws against incest, again, were more completely explained in Leviticus 18:6-18. Here, penalties against these sins are stated, and the penalties for these sins was not death. Okay? As was the case in most other sexual sins Okay? Rather, the penalty for this sin was that the offending parties would be cut off. In other words, they would be driven out. They would be cast away. They were exiled from Israel. Or they were excluded from the community within Israel until the sin was repented of, atoned for, or cleansed through a ceremonial cleansing. Okay? Now, the last two sins in this section, sexual activity with an ant or adultery, bear penalties that seem to belong to God alone. Okay? What was the sin? What was the penalty? And the last two sins in this, they will be childless. So that's not man's ability to do that. That is God that is doing that. So God took on the penalty, administered the penalty for that. Okay? All right. Leviticus 22 to 26. Ye shall therefore keep all my statutes and all my judgments and do them, that the land whither I bring you to dwell therein spew you not out. And ye shall not walk in the manners of the nation which I cast out before you, for they committed all things, and therefore I abhor them. But I have said unto you, ye shall inherit the land, and I will give it unto you to possess it, a land that floweth with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, which has separated you from other people. Ye shall therefore put difference between clean beast and unclean, and between unclean fowls and clean, and ye shall not make your souls an abominable by beast, or by fowl, or by any manner of living thing that creepeth on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. And ye shall be holy unto me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have severed you from other people, that ye should be mine. So the Canaanites who presently lived in the promised land were deeply involved in these sins. And because of that, God would use Israel to judge them. And then he was going to drive them out. Okay? God basically pleaded with Israel to obey him. You know, you just got to obey me. Okay? And he wanted them to obey him so that the same fate would not fall upon them. Now, unfortunately, as we've read the Bible, we know eventually it did. And the land did indeed cast out Israel. Okay? Resulting in both the end of the northern nation of Israel and the southern nation of Judah. From many of these laws and the strong punishment supporting the laws was the fact that Israel was God's chosen nation. Okay? They still are God's chosen nation. And this is an important reason why God wanted them to distinguish between clean animals and unclean animals. Okay? And other aspects of the holiness. The circumcision, all of the things that they had to do in the holiness code to get under the covenant with God, God expected them to follow that. God wanted them to obey this covenant. Israel was chosen because they had an important role, and they do still have an important role in God's plan for the ages. Israel, as much as people would like to say, oh, well, God, I didn't like Israel. No, Israel is still God's chosen people. And if you'll look in Revelation, throughout Revelation, Israel is the focal point for everything that's going to happen. Why? Because Israel is God's chosen people. Israel is not just a nation, it is a people. All right? You can do away with the nation of Israel, the landmass, but you're still going to have the nation of Israel because you're going to have all the people. Yes.
If Israelites were the people, if they weren't God's people, then I don't think they'd be here.
No, they would. If they weren't God's people, they would have been wiped out a long time ago. God had a plan and does and still has a plan for them, for the plan that is unfolding throughout the ages. They were chosen to receive the covenant. Okay? They were chosen to receive God's revealed word. They were chosen to be the lineage of the Messiah. Okay? They were chosen for eternal. In other words, it doesn't mean that simply by being of Israel was a guarantee of their salvation. Okay? These laws were not only given so that Israel could, they were also so God could possess Israel. This demonstration that God wants more than people. God doesn't him because he told us to obey him. All right? God wants a relationship with his people. And he wants their loyalty within that relationship. Okay? And both relationship and obedience are important. But God doesn't want our obedience to him. He doesn't want us to be obedient to him simply to follow the, of the law and do whatever the law says. No, God doesn't want that. God doesn't want our obedience apart from our relationship with him. He wants us to be obedient to him, absolutely. But he wants that relationship with us as well. We have to be obedient and have to be obedient in the relationship with him. Okay? All right, verse number 27. Also, or woman that hath a familiar spirit, or that is a wizard, shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones, their blood shall be upon them. So in ancient Israel, if one consulted a medium, they were to be cut off. All right? Excluded from the community of Israel. But if someone was an actual practitioner of these occult arts, they were to be put to death under the law of Israel. The medium, or the one who dealt with familiar spirits in ancient Israel, bore the responsibility for their own death. Now, this doesn't mean that they took their own life on this one. It means that they were responsible for their own death. They were the ones, it's kind of like you were saying before, they are the ones that, they do it, they know they did it, so you're responsible for it. Okay? You don't have anybody to blame but yourself. It's just like if one of the kids is in school and they say, don't run in the hallway or you're going to get detention, and they say, okay, and then they turn right around and run in the hallway, they can't say, well, it's not my fault I got detention. Yeah, it is. It's your own fault you got detention. You were told the rules. You know what the rules were. You chose to break them. It's your fault that you got punished for it. It's that simple. Okay? Sounds like people today. Yeah. Okay? They were guilty before God and the community. The medium, or the one that dealt with familiar spirits in ancient Israel, led others into sin. And it is a serious thing into sin than to sin ourselves. Okay? It's a much worse thing to do to lead somebody else into sin than it is to Okay? And since it is so much greater, the penalty, therefore, has to be greater as well.
That go with the same thing as not being a stumbling block?
Yeah. Not being a stumbling block. Have blood on your hands. If you can't lead people into a life of sin or a life of crime, so to speak, and not expect to be penalized for it yourself. Yes. Yes. In this context, no. It was usually the death penalty was stoning somebody. All right. Not in these. He doesn't. Yeah. Okay, and that takes us to the end of chapter 20. Any questions, comments, concerns, amens, oh me's? Next week we will get into 21 and go forward from there. This is, in case anybody is wondering, this is the 90th lesson since we started in Genesis 1. So it's been 90 weeks this has been going on. That's almost 2 years.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray you were blessed by the broadcast. If you have a prayer request or questions about Solid Rock Tabernacle, please visit our website at www.solidrocktabernacle.org. That's www.solidrocktabernacle.org. On behalf